Why do you feel empty inside regardless of what happens in your life? Carl Jung discovered the answer to this question that torments millions of people. There's a fundamental part of your soul that you're neglecting, and this neglect is exactly what's creating that inexplicable emptiness you carry. Maybe your life is in complete chaos, or perhaps you have some achievements, but you still experience a persistent feeling that something essential is missing. Jung identified that this emptiness isn't coincidence. It's a desperate signal from your psyche trying to get your attention about crucial aspects of who you really are. Most people spend their entire lives trying to fill this void through external means, seeking validation, running from problems, constantly distracting themselves, or simply resigning to the idea that life is just like this. But Jung revealed that the emptiness can only be filled when you finally recognize and integrate the rejected, denied, and forgotten parts of your own nature. This discovery isn't just psychological theory, it's a practical transformation that can definitively end the feeling of incompleteness that has been following you. Get ready to understand why you feel empty and discover the path to becoming truly whole. The shadow you pretend not to see. Deep within your mind lives a part of yourself that you desperately try to hide from the world. This isn't just about the little white lies you tell or the times you've been less than perfect. We're talking about something much deeper and more powerful, the collection of all the traits, impulses, and characteristics that you've decided are unacceptable about yourself. From the moment you were born, you started learning what was okay and what wasn't. Your parents smiled when you shared your toys, so sharing became good. They frowned when you got angry, so anger became bad. Teachers praised you for being quiet and obedient, so rebellion became something to push away. Society rewarded you for being polite and agreeable, so your natural assertiveness got buried. But here's what nobody told you. Those rejected parts of yourself didn't disappear. They're still there, living in what Jung called your shadow. Every time you judge someone harshly for being selfish, aggressive, or lazy, you're actually seeing your own hidden qualities reflected back at you. The things that trigger you most in other people are usually the exact things you've been trying to deny about yourself. Think about the last time someone really got under your skin. What exactly did they do that bothered you so much? Was it their arrogance, their neediness, their lack of discipline? Now ask yourself this uncomfortable question. Could it be that you recognize something familiar in their behavior? Your shadow contains more than just negative traits, though. It also holds positive qualities that you've rejected because they seemed dangerous or inappropriate. Maybe you learned that being confident was showing off, so you buried your natural leadership abilities. Perhaps you were taught that being emotional was weak, so you cut yourself off from your intuition and creativity. The problem with keeping all of this in the dark is that it takes enormous energy to maintain the pretense. You're constantly monitoring yourself, making sure you don't slip up and reveal the parts of yourself you've deemed unacceptable. This internal police force is exhausting, and it's one of the main reasons you feel drained and disconnected from yourself. Your shadow doesn't just affect how you see yourself, it controls how you relate to others. When you can't accept certain aspects of your own nature, you become unable to accept them in other people either. This creates a world where you're constantly judging, criticizing, and feeling separate from everyone around you. But the shadow isn't your enemy. It's actually a treasure chest of lost energy and forgotten strengths. Jung discovered that when people stop running from their shadow and start acknowledging it, something remarkable happens. They become more whole, more authentic, and, paradoxically, more acceptable to others. The first step isn't to act on every impulse or become someone you're not. It's simply to stop pretending that these parts of yourself don't exist. When you can honestly say, yes, I do have selfish thoughts sometimes, or yes, I can be manipulative when I'm scared, you take away the shadow's power to control you from behind the scenes. This recognition doesn't make you a bad person, it makes you a real person. And real people, with all their flaws and contradictions, are actually more lovable and trustworthy than perfect facades. When you stop hiding from your shadow, you stop forcing others to hide from theirs, and genuine connection becomes possible again. 2. The stranger living inside you. Right now, as you read these words, there's someone else inside your mind making decisions, having opinions, and reacting to life in ways that might surprise you. This isn't about mental illness or multiple personalities. It's about recognizing that your psyche is far more complex and mysterious than you've been led to believe. Jung spent decades studying this phenomenon and discovered that we all have what he called autonomous complexes, essentially independent parts of our personality that can take over without our conscious permission. You've experienced this countless times, even if you haven't realized it. Have you ever found yourself saying something and then thinking, where did that come from? Or maybe you've reacted to a situation in a way that felt completely unlike your normal self. These moments aren't accidents or weaknesses. They're glimpses of the stranger within you. This inner stranger has been shaped by experiences you've forgotten, wounds you've buried, and dreams you've abandoned. It carries wisdom you don't consciously possess and reactions you don't consciously understand. Sometimes this stranger emerges during times of stress or crisis. You might find yourself becoming unusually brave when protecting someone you love, or surprisingly harsh when you feel threatened. Other times, it shows up in quieter moments. Perhaps you'll have a sudden urge to take a completely different path in life, or you'll find yourself drawn to activities or people that don't fit your usual pattern. The trouble is that most people are so identified with their conscious, everyday personality that they treat these deeper stirrings as interruptions or problems to be solved. They want to get back to being their normal selves as quickly as possible. But Jung realized that this stranger isn't separate from you. It is you just as much as your conscious mind is. Think about the times when you felt most alive and authentic. Chances are these were moments when you allowed this deeper part of yourself to emerge. Maybe it was when you stood up for something you believed in, even though it scared you. Maybe it was when you created something beautiful, even though you didn't think you were creative. Maybe it was when you showed compassion to someone, even though you normally keep your guard up. This inner stranger often knows things your conscious mind doesn't. It can sense when people are being dishonest, even when they seem perfectly trustworthy. It can feel when you're in the wrong situation, even when everything looks right on paper. It can recognize opportunities that your logical mind would dismiss as impossible or impractical. But accessing this wisdom requires a different kind of listening. You can't think your way to it or analyze it into submission. You have to learn to pay attention to your body, your emotions, your dreams, and those subtle feelings that don't have words attached to them. You have to become comfortable with not knowing everything about yourself in advance. Many people are afraid of this inner stranger because they think acknowledging it means losing control. They worry that if they let their guard down, they might do something destructive or embarrassing. But the opposite is actually true. When you try to suppress this deeper part of yourself, it becomes more likely to emerge in unconscious and potentially harmful ways. The goal isn't to let the stranger take over your life completely. It's to create a dialogue between your conscious mind and these deeper aspects of yourself. When you can listen to both voices, you make decisions that honor your full complexity rather than just the narrow slice of yourself that you've decided is acceptable. This is where real wisdom begins to emerge. You stop making choices based solely on what you think you should do, and you start including what you actually feel called to do. You stop trying to fit yourself into predetermined molds, and you start discovering who you actually are beneath all the expectations and assumptions. By the way, if you're curious to go even deeper and integrate your shadows and light, check out the SIM Method ebook. It's a concise guide that can help you unlock your inner power in just 5 minutes a day. The link is in the first pinned comment below. 3. Why your dreams are trying to warn you. Every single night, while your conscious mind shuts down, something extraordinary happens. Your psyche begins to speak to you in a language that most people have completely forgotten how to understand. Your dreams aren't just random brain activity or meaningless stories. They're urgent messages from the deepest parts of yourself, trying to show you what you're missing in your waking life. Jung discovered that dreams are like letters from your unconscious mind, written in symbols and metaphors that bypass your logical defenses. They reveal truths about yourself that your conscious mind either can't see or refuses to acknowledge. When you dismiss your dreams as nonsense, you're essentially throwing away mail from the wisest part of yourself. Think about the last vivid dream you remember. Maybe you were being chased by something terrifying, or perhaps you found yourself in a place from your childhood. Maybe you were flying or talking to someone who died years ago. These images weren't chosen randomly. They were specifically selected by your unconscious to communicate something important about your current life situation. When you dream about being chased, it often means there's something in your waking life that you're trying to avoid or run away from. It could be a difficult conversation you need to have, a truth about yourself you don't want to face, or a change you know you need to make, but keep postponing. The thing chasing you in the dream represents whatever you're running from in real life. Dreams about flying frequently appear when you're feeling restricted or limited in your daily life. Your psyche is showing you a vision of freedom and possibility, reminding you that you have more power and potential than you're currently expressing. It's like your inner self is saying, remember what it feels like to soar and stop keeping yourself trapped on the ground. When people from your past show up in dreams, they usually represent aspects of yourself that you've lost touch with. That childhood friend might symbolize a part of your personality that was more playful and spontaneous. A deceased relative could represent wisdom or values that you've forgotten. Your unconscious is trying to reconnect you with these lost parts of yourself. But dreams don't just reveal what's missing. They also warn you about potential problems before they fully manifest in your life. Jung observed that dreams often contain symbolic warnings about health issues, relationship problems, or major life decisions. Your unconscious mind picks up on subtle cues and patterns that your conscious mind misses, then tries to alert you through dream imagery. Many people have dreams about their teeth falling out, which often signals that they're feeling powerless or out of control in some area of their life. Dreams about being unprepared for an exam usually indicate that you feel unprepared for some challenge or responsibility you're facing. These aren't prophecies. They're your psyche's way of processing anxiety and encouraging you to take action. The problem is that most people either don't remember their dreams or dismiss them as meaningless entertainment. But Jung found that when people start paying attention to their dreams and learning to decode their personal symbolism, they gain access to incredible insights about their lives. They begin to understand their own patterns, motivations, and blind spots in ways that years of analysis couldn't provide. Your dreams also serve as a balancing mechanism for your psyche. If you've been too serious and rigid in your waking life, you might have dreams that are playful and chaotic. If you've been avoiding your emotions, you might have intensely emotional dreams that force you to feel what you've been suppressed. Your unconscious is constantly trying to restore equilibrium and wholeness. To start understanding your dreams, you don't need to become an expert in dream interpretation. Begin by simply writing them down as soon as you wake up, before the logical mind can edit or forget them. Look for recurring themes, emotions, and symbols. Ask yourself what each element might represent in your current life situation. Pay special attention to the emotions you feel in dreams, as these are often more important than the specific imagery. A dream that leaves you feeling anxious might be pointing to real anxiety in your life that you haven't acknowledged. A dream that makes you feel joyful could be showing you what would truly fulfill you. Learning to work with your dreams is one of the most powerful ways to connect with your unconscious wisdom. And speaking of practical ways to access this deeper self-knowledge, there's actually a simple method that takes just 5 minutes a day to help you integrate these shadow aspects and unlock your authentic power. If you're curious about going deeper with these concepts, check out the first pinned comment below for a guide that breaks everything down into manageable daily practices. When you start treating your dreams as valuable communication from your unconscious, something remarkable happens. You begin to feel more connected to yourself and more aware of your deeper needs and desires. You start making decisions that align with your authentic nature rather than just your surface preferences. 4. The mask you wear without realizing. Right now you're wearing an invisible mask and you probably don't even know it's there. This mask is so perfectly fitted to your face that it feels like your real skin. You put it on so long ago and have worn it so consistently that you've forgotten there's anything underneath it. Jung called this mask the persona, and recognizing that you're wearing one is the first step toward discovering who you actually are. Your persona began forming when you were very young, as you learned what behaviors would get you love, approval, and acceptance from the people around you. If being smart got you attention, you developed an intellectual persona. If being helpful made people appreciate you, you created a caretaker persona. If being funny kept you safe from criticism, you built a comedian persona. Over the years, this mask became more sophisticated and elaborate. You learned exactly how to present yourself in different situations to get the results you wanted. At work, you might wear the mask of the reliable professional. With friends, you might put on the mask of the fun-loving companion. With family, you might slip into the mask of the dutiful child or responsible adult. The persona isn't necessarily fake or dishonest. It often contains real aspects of your personality. The problem is that it's only a partial representation of who you are. It's like showing people a single photograph and claiming it captures everything about you. The mask shows your best angles and hides your complexities, your struggles, and your full range of human experience. What makes this particularly tricky is that the persona can become so convincing that even you start to believe it's the whole truth. You begin to think that you really are just the helpful person, or just the strong person, or just the successful person. You forget about all the parts of yourself that don't fit into this narrow identity. This creates a strange kind of imprisonment. You become trapped by your own success at creating an acceptable image. People expect you to always be the way you've presented yourself, and you feel pressure to maintain the performance. If you've always been the one who has everything together, you can't admit when you're struggling. If you've always been the optimistic one, you can't express your sadness or fear. The persona also limits your experiences and opportunities. If you're invested in being seen as responsible and mature, you might avoid taking creative risks or trying new things that could make you look foolish. If your persona is built around being independent and strong, you might refuse help even when you desperately need it. But perhaps the most damaging aspect of over-identifying with your persona is that it cuts you off from your authentic emotions and reactions. You become so focused on maintaining your image that you stop paying attention to what you actually feel or want. You make decisions based on what would be consistent with your persona rather than what would truly fulfill you. Jung observed that many people reach midlife and suddenly feel empty or lost, even though they've been successful at maintaining their persona. This happens because the persona is ultimately unsustainable. It requires constant energy to maintain, and it never provides the deep satisfaction that comes from authentic self-expression. The goal isn't to destroy your persona completely. It serves important social functions and helps you navigate the world effectively. The key is to recognize that it's just one tool in your psychological toolkit, not your entire identity. You need to be able to put it on when it's helpful and take it off when it's not. This requires developing what Jung called persona consciousness, the ability to step back and observe the mask you're wearing in any given moment. You start to notice when you're performing versus when you're being genuine. You become aware of the gap between how you're presenting yourself and how you actually feel inside. When you develop this awareness, you gain the freedom to choose how to present yourself, rather than being automatically driven by old patterns. You can decide when it's appropriate to show your vulnerabilities and when it's better to maintain professional boundaries. You can express different aspects of your personality in different contexts without feeling like you're being fake. Most importantly, you start to make room for the parts of yourself that don't fit into your established persona. You allow yourself to be inconsistent, complex, and human. You stop trying to be perfect and start trying to be real. This doesn't make you less lovable. It makes you more relatable and authentic. The people who truly matter in your life will appreciate your authenticity more than your performance, and you'll discover that dropping the mask, even partially, is like taking off clothes that have been too tight for years. The relief is immediate and profound. 5. The secret behind your deepest fears. Your deepest fears aren't what you think they are. What terrifies you most isn't actually the thing itself. It's what that thing represents about a part of yourself that you've been running from your entire life. Jung discovered that our most intense fears are like mirrors, reflecting back the aspects of our own nature that we've decided are too dangerous to acknowledge or express. Think about what genuinely scares you beyond the obvious physical dangers. Maybe you're terrified of being rejected or of looking stupid in front of others. Perhaps you're afraid of losing control or of being seen as selfish. Maybe you panic at the thought of being alone, or conversely, of being trapped in relationships. These fears feel so real and overwhelming because they're connected to parts of your personality that you've exiled into your unconscious. If you're terrified of being rejected, it's often because you've rejected your own neediness, vulnerability, or desire for connection. You've learned to see these natural human traits as weaknesses, so you've buried them deep inside. But they don't disappear. They transform into a fear that others will reject you for having the very qualities you can't accept in yourself. Fear of looking stupid usually stems from rejecting your own curiosity, spontaneity, or willingness to take risks. Somewhere along the way, you decided that not knowing something or making mistakes was shameful, so you buried your natural learning instincts and your experimental nature. Now that rejected part of you haunts you as a fear of appearing incompetent. The fear of losing control typically comes from having disowned your own chaos, unpredictability, or emotional intensity. Maybe you learned that being messy or unpredictable made people uncomfortable, so you developed an iron grip on yourself and your environment. But the more tightly you try to control everything, the more terrifying the possibility of losing that control becomes. What's fascinating is that your fears often point directly toward your greatest potential strengths. The person who's terrified of being selfish might actually have tremendous leadership abilities that they're not expressing. The one who's afraid of being too emotional might have incredible empathy and intuitive gifts that they're suppressing. The individual who fears being alone might have profound self-reliance and independence that they've never allowed themselves to develop. Jung realized that our fears are often inverted expressions of our unlived potential. The qualities we're most afraid of possessing are frequently the very qualities we most need to integrate to become whole. It's as if your psyche creates these fears as a way of highlighting what's missing from your conscious personality. But there's another layer to this. Sometimes we're not afraid of having certain qualities, we're afraid of not having them. The fear of being weak might actually reflect an unconscious knowledge that you are strong, and you're terrified of the responsibility that comes with that strength. The fear of being ordinary might stem from sensing your own extraordinary potential and being overwhelmed by what that might require of you. Your body often knows about these hidden aspects before your mind does. Notice what happens physically when you encounter your deepest fears. Do you feel energy surging through you, even as you feel terrified? Do you simultaneously feel drawn to and repelled by certain situations or people? These conflicting physical responses often indicate that you're encountering a disowned part of yourself. The conventional approach to fear is to avoid it or try to overcome it through willpower. But Jung suggested a different approach. Turn toward your fears with curiosity rather than resistance. Instead of asking, "How can I get rid of this fear?" ask, "What is this fear trying to show me about myself?" When you start to see your fears as messengers rather than enemies, something remarkable happens. You begin to reclaim the energy that's been locked up in avoiding these aspects of yourself. You start to integrate qualities that can actually enhance your life rather than diminish it. This doesn't mean acting recklessly or ignoring legitimate dangers. It means recognizing when your fears are about external threats versus when they're about internal conflicts. It means being willing to examine what you might be avoiding about your own nature. The goal isn't to become fearless, it's to become conscious of what your fears are really about. When you understand the deeper meaning behind your terrors, you can begin to address the real issue, which is usually about accepting and integrating rejected parts of yourself rather than avoiding external situations. 6. The voice interior that you always ignore. There's a voice inside you that's been trying to get your attention for years, maybe even decades. It's not the loud, demanding voice of your everyday thoughts or the critical voice that judges everything you do. It's quieter, deeper, and infinitely wiser than either of those. Jung called this your inner voice, and learning to hear it might be the most important skill you never learned. This voice doesn't speak in the language of logic or analysis. It communicates through feelings, intuitions, sudden insights, and those moments when you just somehow know something without being able to explain how. It's the voice that whispers warnings when something seems off about a situation, even when everything looks perfect on the surface. It's the voice that gets excited about possibilities that your rational mind dismisses as impractical. Most people have been trained from childhood to ignore this voice in favor of external authorities. Teachers, parents, and society in general taught you to trust experts, follow rules, and make decisions based on what's reasonable and socially acceptable. You learn to override your instincts in favor of what other people told you was right or smart or appropriate. But your inner voice carries information that no external authority can provide. It knows things about your unique path, your specific gifts, and your individual timing that no one else could possibly understand. It has access to patterns and connections that your conscious mind can't detect. It can sense the future implications of present choices in ways that purely logical thinking cannot. The problem is that this voice has been ignored for so long that it's learned to speak very quietly. It's like someone who's been interrupted so many times that they've almost stopped trying to contribute to the conversation. Your inner wisdom is still there, but it's buried under layers of should and supposed to, and what will people think. You've probably noticed this voice most clearly during major life transitions or crisis moments. When you're facing a big decision about relationships, career, or life direction, you might suddenly have a clear sense of what feels right, even if you can't justify it rationally. These moments of clarity often come not through thinking harder, but through getting quiet enough to hear what you already know on a deeper level. The inner voice also speaks through your body's responses to people and situations. You might feel energized and expansive around certain people, while others make you feel drained or contracted, regardless of how nice they seem on the surface. Your body is constantly giving you information about what's life-giving versus life-draining, but most people have learned to override these signals in favor of social politeness or logical analysis. Dreams are another primary channel for this inner communication. The strange, symbolic language of dreams often carries messages from your deeper wisdom that your waking mind needs to hear. But you have to be willing to engage with this non-rational form of communication rather than dismissing it as meaningless. Your creative impulses are also expressions of this inner voice. The urge to write, paint, dance, build something, or express yourself in some unique way often comes from this deeper place of knowing. These impulses carry information about who you are and what wants to emerge through you, but they're easily dismissed as impractical or self-indulgent. One of the biggest obstacles to hearing your inner voice is the constant noise of modern life. Between social media, news, entertainment, and the general busyness of daily existence, there's very little space for the quiet voice of inner wisdom to be heard. It requires deliberate effort to create moments of silence and stillness. Another major barrier is the fear of what your inner voice might tell you. People often sense that their deeper wisdom might guide them toward changes that feel scary or disruptive. Your inner voice might suggest leaving a stable but unfulfilling job, ending a relationship that looks good on paper, or pursuing a dream that seems risky. It's easier to stay busy and distracted than to hear guidance that might require courage to follow. But Jung found that people who learn to listen to and trust their inner voice live with a sense of authenticity and aliveness that's impossible to achieve through external validation alone. They make decisions that align with their deeper nature, rather than just their surface preferences. They develop an internal compass that guides them through uncertainty and change. Learning to hear this voice starts with creating regular moments of quiet reflection. It means paying attention to your spontaneous reactions before your analytical mind kicks in. It means noticing what energizes you versus what drains you, and trusting those responses even when they don't make logical sense. The goal isn't to follow every impulse or ignore practical considerations. It's to include your inner wisdom as one of the voices in your decision-making process, rather than automatically dismissing it in favor of purely external or rational considerations. As you sit here right now, having journeyed through these hidden corners of your own psyche, something has shifted inside you. You can feel it, can't you? That subtle but unmistakable recognition that you've been living as only a fraction of who you truly are. The emptiness you've carried for so long finally has a name, and more importantly, it has a solution. Jung's greatest gift wasn't just showing us our psychological wounds, it was revealing that every rejected part of ourselves, every fear we've been running from, every dream we've dismissed, carries the exact energy we need to become whole. You don't have to spend another day pretending to be someone smaller than you are, wearing masks that no longer fit, or ignoring the voice that's been calling you home to yourself. The most important part of your soul isn't lost. It's just been waiting patiently for you to stop running and finally turn around to embrace it. Your journey toward wholeness doesn't start tomorrow or when you figure everything out. It starts right now, with the simple but revolutionary act of accepting that you are far more complex, powerful, and magnificent than you've ever allowed yourself to believe.